Go. Hello, hello, and welcome everybody.
Awesome. Loving all the webcams on.
Good.
This is awesome. I like that most people are not shy. We've all gotten used to Zoom now.
Good. Great group.
Wow, this has become the new normal, huh?
I love this scholar class. You all are so punctual. I say we give a few minutes for people's connections to come online and maybe start in a couple.
That sounds good.
Hugh's here.
Hey.
Hi, Hugh.
Hi, guys. Hello, hello. Hello, everybody.
Hi,
Hello,
Hugh.
hello.
Hi. Thank you for coming. Are we ready to kick this off?
I think we're going to give people maybe like one more minute to make sure everyone's connections are live. I saw some bubbles.
Cool. Sounds great.
Overall, a very, very punctual, big group. This is great.
Definitely. We wouldn't be scholars if we weren't punctual and we didn't read the instructions. And just so everyone's aware, feel free to use the group chat during the discussion and the panel. Michael Silverblatt will be our chat moderator and we'll be taking your questions and queuing them up for the Q&A.
Absolutely, and something I also wanted to add here, I want to give a shout out to Melanie from Colorado. It looks like Melanie is able to write her name and her state in her name. I think that's pretty cool, and then I can get a little idea of where everybody's from. So if you have the ability to rename yourself by adding what state or territory you're from, I think that may be a kind of a cool thing to add.
That's a great idea.
Also, if folks want to put their pronouns, that's also welcome.
Very good point. All right, cool. 4 minutes passed. Let's kick it off.
Okay.
All right. Welcome everyone. Jamie, do you want to say a few words and then I think hand it off to John?
Absolutely, sure. Thank you guys, everybody, for being here. Welcome 2020 scholars. We are absolutely thrilled that you guys could all make it this evening. We know it's been a bit of a crazy year and we're sorry that we weren't able to meet you all in DC, but we actually think this is a really wonderful opportunity to get to know you better and to get to spend a little time. I want to just thank Linda Yao, who is a scholar, 2006 scholar from West Virginia, for putting this all together and putting in all the work, getting our panelists together and doing all the legwork leading up to this. Linda, this is just absolutely wonderful. This is the first time we've ever done this as an organization, and you've done a fantastic job. Also our moderator, Hugh Kennedy, and our chat moderator, Michael Silverblatt. Thank you guys for your work leading up to this. And we are so excited that we have 3 outstanding panelists, Nigel Campbell, Chanel Da Silva, and Martha Bergmark. And so I'm going to hand it off to the chair of our Alumni Association, John Knox. He's going to say a few words of welcome. Then we'll also hear from the chair of our foundation board, Thomas Tao. And then we also are going to hear from Natasha Turkmani, who is helping organize the new alumni advisor program that you guys have received a little bit of information about. She's just going to give a little snippet so you know what to look forward to in the next few weeks, and then we'll get going. So thanks again for being here. And John, you want to give us a little hello?
Yeah, happy to do so. Can everybody hear me? Can you see me and everything? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm John Knox, and I'm a professor of geography, and I teach atmospheric sciences at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. I'm also, as you can see, a 1983 presidential scholar from the state of Alabama, and since 2015, I have been the chair of our Presidential Scholars Alumni Association, which I have been a part of since it started getting together in 1996. You may have seen me already, some of you, online. I'm one of our administrators on our Facebook page, and I also serve on the foundation board, which Tom is going to tell you more about in a minute. And that's kind of where I try to help raise money for this organization so that we can do good things for scholar alums. But I'm not going to hit you up for money, okay? That's not happening here. I just want to tell you what we can do for you. And so welcome officially to the coolest alumni association on the planet, in my opinion. We're unique. Some of us have the same experience. Some of us were part of the very first class in 1964, believe it or not. And some of us were some of the first arts scholars in 1980, and some of us were the first CTE, or Career and Technical Education scholars, that debuted in 2015. Or you could be what we've got here. You're the scholars of 2020. The problem being that the word number 2020 is now becoming a synonym and a successor to snafu and foobar, if you haven't noticed already. So sorry about that, beyond our control. So in our organization, you'll meet people that are older than you, but in a short amount of time, you'll start meeting people that are younger than you as well as people the same age. But what that means is we're really not like a college alumni association or maybe high school where everybody had the same teachers or everybody went to the same school, they all went to the same football game or whatever. We're really different. And we're different in what I think is a deeply good way. All of us have been charged by our nation's leaders to do good and fight for justice and fight for equality here as well as around the world. And we've been selected. We're not any more special than anybody else. We've been selected among the top people in our age group by a presidentially selected commission. That makes us different. And so when we get together, we spend about 15 minutes tops saying, oh, what was it like when you were in DC? Yeah, we did this. What did you do? Oh, 2020. Oh, yeah. Well, sorry, too soon. Didn't mean to mention that. But that's it. Okay. And then we start talking about, okay, what can we do? Because we've got a lot of talent here. I mean, amazing levels of talent, and it goes all the way back to 1964 and all the way forward. And so you can meet people in their 70s as well as their 20s who are really fascinating people. And that's what I want to emphasize. In our alumni association, you're among friends. You're at home. We're the most concentrated collection of talented, multi-talented, passionately curious, funny, and usually nice people you'll ever be around. Even if you go to an Ivy League school, even if you go on to be a Rhodes Scholar, of which we've had 65 of our alums become Rhodes Scholars. The breadth of this group, it's all 50 states, but not just that, it's DC, Puerto Rico, and the territories, and Americans abroad. From the beginning, it's been 50% women. We've got artists, we've got musicians, we've got dancers, we've got CTE people as scientists, poets, you name it, and it's amazing. But It's not overwhelming. Most of us don't become famous, and we aren't into that anyway. We aren't the show horses of the world. Most of us anyway. We're the workhorses. We're the people who make good things happen and keep our institutions running wherever we are while somebody else takes more of the credit. And we don't really care because we're into helping our nation and our world more than taking credit for it. If that sounds like you, then you're home. Welcome home. And so because of that, I like to tell a story about the picture behind me. Y'all can see this picture behind me? Yeah? Anybody see somebody you recognize maybe? Y'all see that? Let's see. How about this guy? There, that guy.
Bill Clinton?
It's Bill Clinton. Oh, wow. Future President Bill Clinton. He looks a little young here, doesn't he? It's kind of hard for y'all to recognize because his nose has gotten redder over time or something like that. I don't want to talk about Bill Clinton, though, okay? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shift over. I'm eclipsing Bill. It's a penumbral eclipse of the Bill. And I'm going to talk instead about this guy. This fellow, his name was Roosevelt Thompson, and he was a presidential scholar. I'd like to tell you a little bit about him. He was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. He was the son of an AME Zion minister, African Methodist Episcopal Church, and his mom was a teacher. He was a 1980 presidential scholar, and then he was an advisor in 1981 and 82. We've got some advisors on here anywhere? You've met your advisors? Yeah, he was one too. So let me put Rosie in perspective and why I'm telling you about him. Since the spring of 1975, there have been over 135 million U.S. high school graduates and over 55 million college graduates in the U.S. Of these, over 7,000, over 7,500 now have been presidential scholars, like Rosie. About 2,600 have been named Truman Scholars, and y'all may have heard of that. That's for service to society. It's a prestigious college scholarship. And over 1,400 people in the U.S. have been named Rhodes Scholars. But let's do the Venn diagram, all right? The Venn diagram says out of the 135 million high school grads and then the 55 million college grads, only 10 people have been selected as a presidential scholar and a Truman Scholar and a Rhodes Scholar. That's 1 in 5.5 million. And that is Rosie Thompson. Bill Clinton, this guy, remarked that Rosie's selection as a Rhodes Scholar when he was at Yale must have been the easiest decision the selection committee ever had to make. Rosie was a football player. He played the line at Yale. He was like second string lineman, and he was 5'7". Think about it. He was president of the SGA. He helped to integrate, kind of fully integrate his school and become an SGA president. Everything was perfect until he was going back after spring break from Arkansas to Yale to New Haven. He was driving at 5:30 in the morning on the New Jersey Turnpike, and a truck crossed the median and plowed right into his little mid-70s car, and it killed him. This was such a tragedy for our country. There was an entire one-page story in Newsweek about his funeral. Bill Clinton spoke. Some of the people that integrated the Little Rock schools spoke. His friends had already been planning to run his presidential campaign in the then faraway year of 2008. I'm not kidding. He was Barack Obama before Barack Obama was Barack Obama. Rosie Thompson. It was a loss to the nation. But we're not going to stop the story there, because he wasn't just a resume. He was a person. One of his close advisor friends, a woman named Marie Lynn Miranda, who just became provost at Notre Dame, in case anybody's going to Notre Dame, she said this for our 50th anniversary book that we produced for the 50th anniversary of the Scholars Program. She said, "We talked often about our desire to serve the world, our obligation to give back. He was humble in manner, but he had a lot of power in that humility. You could feel the energy he brought. He helped you to be your best self. He made you better. It was the purest and truest friendship I have ever had." Marie thought so much of Rosie that she and her husband named their first son after him, Thompson. And so when the Presidential Scholars Foundation began to plan for an award to recognize the very best of our group, we didn't reach out to a billionaire donor and say, if you give us a bunch of money, then we'll put your name on it. And probably Jamie and Tom regret the fact that I pushed for the award to be named after Rosie Thompson. The idea being that let's live up to someone that exemplified the very best. We'll find the money somehow for the award, but let's have integrity at the top. Let's honor him. Let's honor people who shared love with the Presidential Scholars and beyond, and who loved our program. Let's show them some love back. And so we have the Rosie Thompson Awards each year, or most years, honoring our very best. And one of our first recipients was former U.S. Poet Laureate Rita Dove. Other recipients have been Eugene Robinson, for example, and also the dancer Desmond Richardson, all Presidential Scholar alums. So with all that, now hopefully I've got you a little bit interested in our group. So what is it we do? Well, we do lots of things. You'll want to be visiting our presidentialscholars.org page and update information as it changes, or put it in right now because I don't think we have it yet, about you, the 2020 scholars. What is your contact information? And tell other people that we want to have that so we can send you our monthly e-newsletter, the Medallion, which Jamie has supervised so well over the years, which tells you what we're up to, what individuals are up to, and other things. We have virtual meetups. This is a unique event, but we also have meetups that are going on regularly, and also in person when we can do things in person. We've had meetups all the way from Seattle to South Africa and to Switzerland. And so that's kind of what we do. We do a few other things. We have social media pages. We have about 2,000 people on Facebook and about 1,400 or so on LinkedIn. There's a hangout tomorrow night that's going on, or it's maybe tomorrow. I don't even remember the time because I'm so busy. But if you want to get the details on that, go on to Facebook. Omri, look for the name Omri, and you'll see him posting things. And then finally, our seed grant program that's jointly with the Alumni Association and Foundation together, we provide seed grant money for good ideas from people young and older who couldn't probably get the money otherwise. This is just our second year that we've done it, and we just announced 4 recipients out of 21 applicants, and there were a lot of strong applications. That's a program that will be growing over the years. And we do a lot of other things. We host events. We have had big events with hundreds of people present, with music and everything else on our 50th and 55th anniversaries. And 55th was last year in 2019. And for the 50th anniversary, we produced a book where this picture right here appears about Rosie Thompson and his story. And so I think you get a taste from me exactly what this group is all about. You also get the feeling that I probably talk too much. So now I'm going to back away and let the festivities begin. But welcome from the Presidential Scholars Alumni Association. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you, John. Tom, you want to take it away?
Just figuring out how to unmute my audio here. Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Tao. I'm a scholar from 1988 from New York. It's morning my time. I'm actually dialing in from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So as John was saying earlier, we are very diverse and we're all over the world. So I'm on the other side and delighted to be joining everyone today. I just wanted to, again, echo John's comments. We try to, our job here is to really work for you. And we're serving on behalf of all the amazing alumni that we have. Joining us on this call are some other board members as well. And I was hoping I could, if you could just wave your hand. We have Judge Connie Clark. We have Martha Bergmark, who's also going to be on the panel. Angela Zimin and Michael Weiss. And Jamie, am I missing anyone here? I was looking through the gallery.
I think so.
Well, if I've missed any board members, I
I
apologize.
think
But
that's
again,
everybody who's on, and John, yeah, I think that's everybody.
and
who's
John,
on
of
right
course,
now.
is on our board.
Right.
I think the key message is we're all here to serve you, the class of 2020. So I'm not here to give any advice. I'm actually here to seek your advice. How can we make our organization more useful to serve you? How can we be a platform, especially during these times, that can be a platform and bring everyone closer together? I know that we have a lot of work to do as an organization, but more importantly, as a country and as a planet. And so that I think this is the reason why, for the first time, we're organizing a panel like this. I can't wait to get started. So I'm just going to keep my comments very short. Again, I want to welcome everybody. And I know I'm the guy, as John was saying, we've got great social media platforms. I think some of you I've already met. You can see me on LinkedIn. That's my preferred platform. I think I've welcomed some of you through LinkedIn, and I encourage all of you to reach out to the Presidential Scholars. Connect with us. Make the organization what you want it to be. Our job is to really help you. And again, as John was saying, Presidential Scholars, we're kind of behind the scenes, but we are trying to make an impact. I'll give you another example. Although we can't meet face to face, but through the power of technology, we're all meeting today from all around the world. And here's a fun fact. It was a presidential scholar who was one of the first investors into Zoom. So again, we're depending on you to really make an impact. I think I was always very moved at a panel where Judge Connie Clark talked about the potential and the responsibilities that we have as presidential scholars. And I think more than ever, we're going to need you to really make a difference. And with that, once again, welcome to the Alumni Association. And I want to turn it back over to the moderator. Thank you.
Tom, thank you for that. It's a wonderful intro. And yeah, I think we're going to kick it off unless there are any objections, but I think we're all met and ready to get down to the nitty gritty.
Hugh, let's have Natasha say a few words just before we get started on some of the summer programming, and then we'll kick it into the panel.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, thanks, Linda. Hi, I'm Natasha. I'm a scholar from class of 2014 from DC, and just wanted to say how excited we are to launch the new Alumni Advisor Program. So since we can't meet in person this year, we actually are launching this new type of program where you've been matched up into groups of 10 to 11 scholars with an advisor. And our hope is that throughout the summer, you'll be able to have really thoughtful, engaging conversations with your peers, and hopefully extend that conversation through the end of 2020. Especially as we navigate through so much uncertainty, we hope you can find really a network of hopefully lifelong friends. So as Tom said, we really work for you and we'd love to hear your feedback. So you'll be receiving a lot of surveys throughout the summer. Yeah, and so thanks for all participating. We got full participation from class of 2020, and also like to thank our volunteers of advisors. So that'll turn it back to the moderator. Thanks.
Also, really quickly, I would love to make a quick announcement about the Q&A session that follows at the very end, if that's all right. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. During today's panel discussion, feel free to go ahead and write any questions that you have that come up, and I will be selecting a number of questions to appear at the end of the Q&A session. I'm about to paste a very long message in the chat. Just make sure to read through that really quickly, and then you're all set. Thank you, guys.
All right. All right. All right. Thanks, Michael. Natasha. I want to give quick thanks to Tom. It's great to see you, and John and Jamie and the board. Thank you for asking me back. I was really excited to be a part of this. And it's great to be reunited with two presidential scholars from my year, longtime friends, Nigel and Chanel. Also in the mix, we have Martha, trying to find her in gallery view. Yeah, so welcome everybody to Black Lives Matter, our panel on co-creating a more equitable future. What this is going to look like today is a quick rundown of intros from the panelists. They're going to talk a little bit about our evolving world and how they are personally navigating both the civil unrest that's happening in the country right now, along with some of the complications that COVID-19 has brought. So with that said, I'd love it to just throw it to the panel. Would it be okay if you guys introduce yourselves?
Sure, that's fine with me.
Hair's not.
Should I go first? I'll go first since I'm talking. Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday, and congratulations to all of you for being named presidential scholars. Whoop, whoop. This is a dope family to be a part of, so I welcome you personally. My name is Chanel De Silva. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York City, and I am a presidential scholar from 2004, which we were just talking about was 16 years ago, which feels like, what does that even mean? So I'll just say, enjoy your youth and take advantage of it. Time flies. And I'm tossing the baton to Nigel.
Hi, everybody, and I agree. Congratulations. This is a huge honor. It's a beautiful family to be a part of. I'm Nigel Campbell. I'm from the Bronx, New York. I am also a 2004 presidential scholar. Chanel and I are actually childhood best friends. So that's cool. And one thing she didn't say that I want to say is that Chanel is actually a presidential scholar distinguished teacher this year, because one of our students is a presidential scholar in the arts. So that's really cool to see that kind of legacy of this institution. I direct a dance company called Give Me Company in Tribeca, and Chanel and I are co-founders of an organization called Move NYC, which has a mission of cultivating greater diversity and equity in the dance field.
Thanks for that, Nigel. I'll be forgetting.
And hi, everyone. Let me add my congratulations. I'm so excited for you, and you should be very proud of yourselves. And I thank you in advance for the contributions I know you're going to make to making our country a better place. I'm Martha Bergmark. I am the class of 1966, the third class of presidential scholars. Visited at the White House with Lyndon Johnson, who founded the program, and was a scholar from Mississippi.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks again, everybody, for being here. My first question that I'd like to throw out, well, first of all, I have a story of my own, which is about Nigel and Chanel. When we were all applying for the Presidential Scholar Program, I'll never forget, I think I was on the phone with Nigel. He was in New York City. I was in Minnesota. I'm in Minneapolis at the moment. And I remember him telling me, yeah, I think I'm gonna write my my lengthy presidential scholar application about Chanel. And Chanel's gonna write hers about me. I remember sort of to myself thinking, oh man, that sounds like a terrible idea. I don't know, you know. But it worked. And I look back on that always thinking, man, I wish I could have read that, because I'm sure it was a powerful testimony of not only friendship, but collaboration. So it's very cool to see them collaborating still, and to have founded a tuition-free academy for young dancers in the city is really an unbelievable achievement in my book. So with that said, I wanted to ask the panel what it was like being named a presidential scholar during your final year of high school, and if you could tell us a little bit about what that process was and how you remember it today.
Well, should we do this chronologically, guys? I'll start.
Right.
1966 was a third class of scholars, and that was at just the third time, you know, the third year, after, and Lyndon Johnson was still president. Apropos of Black Lives Matter, I was a scholar at the last moment that Black Lives Matter was really a happening thing in America. I grew up in Mississippi. My parents were active in the civil rights movement. I had no idea what Presidential Scholars was. At that point, it was something you did not apply for. I even found out what the program was when a telegram from Lyndon Johnson himself arrived at my house. That was sort of like being struck by lightning. And in those days, we went to the White House. As I said, I'd been active as a teenager in the civil rights movement. I got to sit next to Thurgood Marshall on the White House lawn where we had dinner. Sergeant Shriver was there, head of the Office of Economic Opportunity. Also, meaningful to me, given what having been a teacher's aide in the first Head Start program. So I came into the Scholars Program truly focused on my work and my family's work in the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement. I got to Washington and I found out that my scholar class was totally focused on the Vietnam War and how wrong the Vietnam War was. That was just an issue that was barely on my radar screen. It was, went to the State Department, we visited with Cyrus Vance. I was kind of stunned by the fact that my scholar colleagues were quizzing Cyrus Vance about, in fairly hostile, terms about what this Vietnam War thing was about. So it was just a fascinating moment. But again, apropos of Black Lives Matter, it was at a time, just as the Reconstruction was just a 12-year period before Jim Crow, shut it down absolutely. The civil rights movement of the 60s, which really molded me as a person and set me on my life course as a civil rights lawyer, ended with two big policy changes that began to happen in the late 70s and early 80s, mass incarceration being one of them, and the other being just policy moves that led us down a path of inequality that we find ourselves at today. So I find myself really happy for you scholars of today. I mean, I think you're becoming scholars at a moment of real possible change in America. So Black lives, once again, will matter, but only if we make it matter. So I think that's our work to do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Chanel, do you want to go next?
Yes, of course. So I'm going to just dial back a few years before 18, just to give a little history. Like I said, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I have been in the arts and dancing my whole life. I actually met Nigel when I was 10 years old. We went to church together. We danced with the same local dance studio. We went to high school together. So we literally were attached to the hip for probably 12 to 14 years. Our actual, our colloquial name is actually Shanigel. So if you see us together, you can call it Shanigel. So, I because of the environment that I grew up in Brooklyn, a single mother, raising both me and my brother, I danced in arenas where it was affordable for me to dance. But when I needed to start training for real, I didn't have the money to do it. And sometimes it was out of my geographic range. My mother didn't feel comfortable with me going to certain places. So in a lot of ways, I had to push myself into places where I needed to be to get the training that I deserved. But with that comes a certain mentality that maybe I'm not good enough, right? So I was kind of growing up knowing I was talented, but because I wasn't in certain rooms, I questioned whether I was good enough. So in high school, I started to train more rigorously. I pushed for those scholarships so I could fight to be in the rooms I wanted to be in. And then senior year comes around and I, apply for Young Arts. And through Young Arts, I was nominated to be a presidential scholar in the arts. Young Chanel was like, what is even happening? I didn't even know that I was talented enough to be amongst some of the most celebrated teenagers in the country. So when it came time for me to apply to be a presidential scholar, I felt a little bit out of my comfort zone. I knew I deserved it, but I had to constantly remind myself that I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be doing this. So I just say that now as an adult because I'm looking back and I've been battling imposter syndrome for a very long time. But being nominated to be a presidential scholar in the arts, doing this with my best friend Nigel, us writing our essays about each other, I think the prompt question was actually write about someone or something that inspires you deeply. And Nigel and I decided that we want to write it about each other because that's just the truth. But then being named a presidential scholar, it gave me just enough confidence to know that for the rest of my life, I actually deserve to be in this room. Something about knowing that and learning that about me and about this cohort that I'm now a part of at 18, I believe set me on a beautiful track for success for the rest of my life. So now at 34, when I look back, I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful that I had those really uplifting but anchoring moments. Yes, accolades, but also just recognition that I have the talent and the intellect and the gifts to be whoever I want to be in this world. And I'm connected to people who are just like that for the rest of my life. So knowing what I knew about my young childhood, then 18, and now being named a presidential scholar was a pivotal landmark. It really was. You know, I have it on my resume, not just so much because people recognize it, but because I'm proud of it. It defined me in a certain way. So I leave that with you all, our new scholars as well, like not as like a chip on your shoulder, but just as a little seed of confidence that if you're ever doubting yourself, know that there are a group of people who are doing excellent things that believe in you. So take that forward for the rest of your life.
Thank you, Chanel. And by the way, I live in Harlem, so as I closed all my windows, but if you hear like a soundtrack playing, it's the summer in Harlem.
Sounds.
Just enjoy it. You might hear a siren, you might hear some music, it's all good. So let's see, I was an underdog when I started training in dance. I was very small. I wasn't super flexible. Someone's off mute.
It's a hard part of the story to tell because there's a lot of.
If you could just, hi guys, if you could just, Ryan, I think you might be off mute, Ryan. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Nigel.
I really wanted to, let's see, and I was aggressive in my pursuit of fulfilling the excellence that I believed was inside of me. And every time I got a no, or every time someone else didn't see that excellence in me, it gave me fuel to forge ahead and realize something in myself that I felt was there. I wasn't sure. I didn't know how to achieve it. I didn't know if I could, but I felt that it was there. And going through the process of young arts and then ultimately becoming a presidential scholar was a huge affirmation to me that the potential I saw inside of myself was real. And that I was a part now of a legacy of greatness and of people who have been recognized at a very early age who will be future leaders in our country and in our world. And that I stand on a long line of incredible people, incredible scholars, incredible artists, incredible humans in society who are making our world a better place. And that gave me the additional fuel that I needed to keep going. In January, I went to my childhood home because my mother wanted me to finally clean out all of my stuff from my room when I was 18. She said she's done being a storage unit. And so I was going through everything, looking for stuff to throw out. And I found the letter that you all just received that told me that I was a presidential scholar. And I reread it. And the Secretary of Education at the time, I remember just reading the words that were on there, that I was going to be a part of changing the world, that I was going to make the world a better place, that I had a role to play in shaping the society that we want to live in. And I find myself in now a position of leadership that I never actually thought I would be in or wanted. I just wanted to be a dancer. And I looked back at that letter and I realized that my whole life had been preparing me to be where I am now, even when I didn't know it, even when I didn't see it. And the first major affirmation of that was becoming a presidential scholar. So know for all of you that there is such a tremendous amount of greatness in you and that you will shape this world into what we all want it to be. So we look to you, actually, and we'll talk a lot about that tonight. We're here to talk, but we're really here to share so that you can move us all forward.
It's a beautiful point. Thank you, Nigel. Yeah. So the next question I'd like to bring up is, the world seems right now deeply at odds, both with the COVID-19 fallout, as well as everything that's led to the filling of the streets of America in the light of George Floyd's murder here in Minneapolis. Could you, the panel, speak to how you've been coping with just the daily news and how you've had to make adjustments as leaders in your respective fields? And I think I'll throw it to Martha first, if that's okay.
Thank you, Hugh. So pandemic hit as it did for all of us in early March. I'll tell you a little bit more later about my current work at a group called Voices for Civil Justice. We push out stories about the people who suffer in our justice system through the media as a way of getting across what the consequences are of having a justice system that doesn't work for everyone. And so guess what? We were kind of busy. So starting the 1st of March with the economic meltdown, came an eviction crisis, a lack of, sudden drop out of the job market. All of this happening to people, and totally disproportionate impact on the people who carry most of the burden in our society. And then we had, here was someone who had lost his job and was, charged with or suspected of passing a bad bill or something and ending up dead for it, in Minneapolis at the hands of the police. So again, it's just obviously been a shocking and awful moment in the world, as well as, in the United States. And yet it's also been something that has just sort of ripped the scabs off of what we know to be the ills of our society to begin with. So that's why I've spent the last 4 months, as I'm sure all you have, in a state of a little bit of shock, over really what's going on. And yet as I said earlier, I find myself more hopeful at this moment, but only if we do it, only if we grab the moment and do something with it. So that's really been our focus at Voices and in the justice system world, and the access to justice movement that I'm a part of. That I think is what has motivated us these last few months to do our best to really lift this up as a moment to say, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Again, we've tried to say that at certain points in our history, unsuccessful, with steps of success. I don't want to say utterly unsuccessfully. There has been a progression. And yet this is a moment to really recognize that, boy, not enough. So in Mississippi, where I still, I founded the Mississippi Center for Justice in the early 2000s as an organization to pick up the unfinished work of the civil rights movement and to advance racial and economic justice in Mississippi. So what we saw just in the last couple of weeks is the Mississippi flag come down, the Confederate emblem that is on the flag. Again, such a symbol, and yet an important step. But our feeling of urgency now is to turn that into actual policy change. That's great. Get rid of the statues, get rid of the get rid of those emblems of oppression that have just littered the landscape of our country for all these, decades and centuries, and yet that's not enough. So that's what I feel motivated about.
Great. Thank you, Martha. Nigel, Chanel.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Sure. One, I just want to thank you, Martha, for your decades of service and work. It's really inspiring. Yeah, COVID has been crazy for all of us. I think we can all agree on that. I work in the dance field, and our entire profession has been canceled because people cannot gather. People cannot roll around and sweat and breathe on each other. And dance is a communal art form. So kind of our whole lifestyle revolves around community, people coming together, and then large groups of people cramming into small spaces to watch us share our art. So all of that has pretty much gone away for the time being. So this was a drastic shift in my life and in questioning who I am, disconnected from the life that I've built over the last 33 years. I spent about 3 weeks, I think, sitting on my couch mourning. And then the George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor happened. And it just felt like an onslaught. It was so much to take in, so much to deal with, so much to process. And then I got inspired to channel all of my frustration and my fear and my sadness and my beautiful rage into action. And actually today, this is so funny, I was on Facebook, and if you have Facebook, they do like, on this day, 4 years ago, on this day, 10 years ago. So on this day, today, 4 years ago, in 2016, I made a post on Facebook, and it says, okay, I have indulged in my feelings enough, which was necessary. I am here, I choose life, I will not crumble, I will not be defeated, I will not fear, I will not crawl into a hole and disappear. It's time to get back to work, redouble my efforts, get informed, promote solution-based narratives, and create. Black Lives Matter. So that was 4 years ago today. And that beautifully and sadly is a reflection of where I'm at right now. Exactly. But what I do know now that I didn't know then is that 1 month later, Chanel and I invited our first class of young professionals to our organization, Move NYC. And 4 years later, one of those young professionals, who is a Black and Asian young man, first generation American, is joining this beautiful class of presidential scholars. And so turning that beautiful rage into action is fuel for change. And so what I know is different is that out of this, good things will come. And that'll be in large part because of all of you. So that's where I'm at.
Since March, my life has felt like my emotional well-being, I should say, has felt like a large seesaw. Like Nigel said, I was a puddle of Chanel on the couch for at least 2 weeks, before I decided to get up and to start looking at life less as I'm at a disadvantage and thinking of it more like, what are my resources? What can I do in this time? And then being hit with all of the things, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, being hit with that, I was conflicted because there's a part of me that was, of course, hurt and shocked and enraged. And then there was also another part of me that was absolutely exhausted because, like Martha said, we've been talking about this for a long time. In fact, in 2013, when Nigel and I first breathed the idea of Move NYC, just saying it into the world. It was the beginning of Black Lives Matter when it was Trayvon Martin and not George Floyd. You know, that's when we first decided we need to do something. So as I kept letting all of the information come in and out of me, I decided to start thinking about it differently. And there was a lot of talk about anti-racism, right? Especially in institutions that have largely been ignoring it for some time. And I started thinking about, well, what does it mean to be anti-racist? And for me, the root of it is to be proactive. I no longer want to see our country and our society get to a place where something terrible happens and then we all get up in arms together. It's too late. So I'm like, we need to be proactive. In fact, we need to be doing the work inside of our homes, inside of ourselves, inside of our communities, inside of our institutions, where we are actively holding each other accountable so that these egregious acts and micro and macroaggressions just no longer have space to happen. And I believe in this idea of dropping a little pebble into a lake. The ripples start very, very small. That's in your intimate circle. And then before you know it, we have a tsunami of change happening, washing up on the shore. And I believe in that very, very, very deeply. So my new mantra that I've been just trying to talk about so much is, you know, while Nigel and I sit on a lot of these panels, is to be proactive. And that means a ton of things. You know, it means if you see something happening, be brave enough to say something about it. If you feel something happening within yourself, be brave enough to ask a question. These are all things that I can do before something terrible happens that I feel will neutralize a lot of the tensions that we have going on. Now, to Martha's point as well, there's a large stain in the country that we need to really address on a large level. But I believe moving forward and looking towards the future, we all have the power to hold ourselves accountable and to be proactive. So that is the positive that I continue to try to share and meditate on in myself, just because it's our world. We are in charge of this world. We have to make it better. You know, we can't wait for someone else to do it. Otherwise, it'll never get done. So like Nigel said, I think even though this has been a hurtful and painful time, I believe it's a beautiful cracking open that is going to lead us to a better place.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Martha, I wanted to turn it to you to ask a little bit about Voices of Civil Justice, if that's okay. I was hoping you could share what the overarching mission of the org is, and if you could detail a little bit about what those challenges look like in the face of a worldwide pandemic.
So I don't know how many of you out there are maybe headed for law school. I suspect there are some of you who are, and I encourage you in that regard. And part of what the Alumni Association, I think, of Scholars is intended to do, and I'm certainly eager to help that happen, is to develop those relationships across generational boundaries to help you do that. But for those of us like me and Justice Connie Clark, who's on the call this afternoon, who's a member of the Tennessee Supreme Court, a scholar of 1968, I think, Connie, is that right? For those of us who have made our careers and put our life work into justice system and justice system reform, there are just any number of opportunities for you to be there. You know, there's lots of effort to do in terms of Nigel's and Chanel's counsel to all of us to find your niche and then make a difference. There's certainly opportunity for that. And I think the Alumni Association and our individual scholars are wanting to be helpful to you if we can. But what I've done the last few years is an effort called Voices for Civil Justice. And we recognized that, like the criminal justice reform effort, which has really yes, you know, the recent happenings of outrageous happenings, and of course dating back to Ferguson. You know, as Nigel and Chanel have talked about, this is certainly not new, and it's not even new back to 2013 or 14, as we know. So it does keep happening, but there has been tremendous progress on criminal justice reform and bringing attention, with the attention of the media, the attention of people in general. So it's my belief that we couldn't be where we are today but for that very strong effort that many people have made to get us to a point that we can now pivot from and move forward from. Similarly, the civil justice system, we have one big justice system, but it prosecutes criminals or alleged criminals. It has a criminal justice component, and then it has a civil justice component. Most people don't really realize that you can lose your home, you can lose your family, you can lose your livelihood without benefit of a lawyer. You are guaranteed under the Constitution a lawyer in a criminal case, not so in a civil case. So this entire eviction a crisis that we're confronting right now because of the pandemic and the economic meltdown, people are there with really defenseless. You know, 90% of eviction cases, for 90% of landlords in eviction cases tend to have lawyers, and 90% of tenants do not. And the results are what you might expect them to be. So our effort at Voices for Civil Justice is really to do media advocacy. It's to find those stories that help people understand what is wrong in the civil justice system, why it matters that we fix it, what's happening to people. So we push out that media pipeline. We do trainings for and do media skills training for a network of a couple thousand people in the civil justice field to be spokespeople for change. That includes judges, it includes court personnel, it includes legal aid lawyers, really seeking to make a change in our justice system. So we as Americans value, Americans believe that equal justice under law is a right, not a privilege. And yet for most people that doesn't work out to be the case. So that's been my effort the last few years.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Martha. My next question is actually for all three of the panelists, but I wanted to, and this is a little bit more personal, but I'd love to hear what steps you've been taking in order to just care for yourselves as leaders and leaders in positions of power, and also as leaders in what I deem a very high performance and high stress kind of job. Could you shine a little light on how you just maintain and how you, when needed, are able to replenish the well? That's one of my favorite expressions when I'm coaching artists or working with actors. So I'd love to throw that over to Nigel off the top.
Sure. I think that's a great question. I think it's really important for all of us. These pervasive issues can feel overwhelming. There's so much work to be done, and it likely won't be done in one lifetime. It already hasn't, right? So it's gone on, and it could be this topic, it could be another one. But as humans, as agents of change, as people who are passionate about leaving the world a better place than we came, it can often be daunting and draining. And so it is very important that you carve out time for yourself, for self-care. I schedule in self-care and rest the way I schedule in a meeting. So on Sunday, it's blocked off. Or on Tuesday from 6 to 10, I'm busy not dealing with anyone but myself. And maybe that means laying on a couch, right? But I need those moments for myself so that I can continue to do the work. What I also do is that whenever I have a really big project, something that takes a lot out of me, I take time away. And I do, if I could do a week, that would be great. Sometimes you can't. Maybe it's 2 days, maybe it's 3 days. But I always separate whatever that big project is and the next thing. because I need to recharge. And the reason is, what I always say is, if I am empty, I have nothing left to give. So we are passionate people. We are people who want to get things done. But if you are empty, how can you help anyone else? If you're burnt out, how can you help someone else? When you're on an airplane, they say put your mask on first and then put on, you know, the person sitting next to you or the person that you're with. Because I can't be of service unless I make space for myself to be well. In this environment, in this COVID environment that we've been in now, sometimes that looks like turning off the news for a few days and releasing myself from some of the sensationalism. Sometimes that means going to a park and realizing that there's still so much beauty in New York City and in this country and in the world just by looking at the trees and listening to the birds chirp. And that balances out what I see on the news, which would have me believe that the entire world is burning. So sometimes I need to separate myself so that I can keep going and keep fighting. And I always need to schedule in time to say, you know what, I am busy that day. I'm busy sitting on my couch. I'm busy doing nothing. I'm busy watching, you know, I don't know, RuPaul's Drag Race, whatever. Okay, like that's what I'm doing right now. So that's one way that I, you know, that's my kind of process.
RuPaul's Drag Race. Great.
So good.
I'm taking notes at a fever pace. Thank you, Nigel. That's great. Chanel, do you mind taking it up next?
Yeah, of course. I mean, piggybacking a little bit off of Nigel,
Yeah.
I think we are a generous, giving people naturally. I mean, we are artists, so the artists tend to do this thing where just your heart has an abundance of sharing. That's a part of the profession. You can't be stingy with yourself if you're an artist. So there's always this giving mentality. And I found myself very burnt out about 2 or 3 years ago because I had given it all up and nothing was being poured back into me. And I sat down with my therapist and I was like, Eve, you know, I'm so burnt out and I don't have enough time for myself and my calendar is just filled up. She said, well, why don't you just make time for yourself? You know, like give yourself a day. I was like, well, something always comes up. And she said this, and it stayed with me forever. And I always share this when we talk about self-care. She said, well, if let's say you make a coffee date with Hugh and it was at 6 o'clock, would you stand Hugh up? Would you just not show up for Hugh? I was like, absolutely not. I have integrity. You know, like if I say I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. She was like, oh, okay, great. So how come you hold yourself accountable for other people and you don't hold yourself accountable for yourself? Whew, she read me for filth. And I said, okay, Eve, I heard that. And I will remember that for the rest of my life. So like Nigel, I actually like put a block on the calendar and it just says Chanel. And I don't have to explain to myself or to anybody else what that Chanel block is. It could be me choreographing a solo on myself. It could be me binge watching TV. It could be me finally doing the laundry that I was supposed to do for weeks that I haven't had time to do. You know, that I've been like stressed about because I have to look at it every time I walk in my house. You know, it's little things like that if you don't give yourself the time to do, it just piles up and then you're just stressed. And then when you're empty, you're mad at everybody else. And everybody's like, whoa, why is Chanel upset all the time? She always has an attitude. It's because Chanel hasn't given herself time to pour back into herself. And it took me holding myself accountable to understand that. It's very easy to point the fingers when you're empty. So that would be my first thing to say. Check in with yourself, be kind to yourself, give yourself grace and mercy. You are doing a great job. Point blank, period. That's it. Like Nigel, I put myself on a news ration. CNN was not allowed in my house for at least 5 days out of the week. I checked in for just knowing a little bit of what's happening. And then other than that, I was reading my book and staying connected to people. And the last thing I'll say is just this thing about being a leader is very interesting because I can speak for myself and Nigel when I say that neither one of us decided that we were leaders. We just decided to do something because we were passionate about it. And now that we're doing stuff and we've been talking about something very passionately for X amount of years, we're noticing that people are asking us questions and depending on us. We have a whole student cohort that's like, what are we going to do about this? What should we do? What should we do? And then there's this like heavy responsibility that there are people looking to us for answers. And even in that, there needs to be some self-care. So Nigel and I are constantly reminding each other, listen, just because we have started something and we're doing something and we have a platform does not make us perfect. Perfect does not exist. It is a myth. We are all just doing the best we can each and every day. So I think that is another form of self-care that I've allowed myself. That doesn't mean to be lazy or to not do the right thing, but at the same time to understand that I don't always have all the answers, and it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know, let me get back to you. I think that that is a form of self-care, because the anxiety that comes with trying to be right and perfect all the time is too heavy a burden to bear.
Amen. That's great. That's great. Also, I'm seeing lots of comments and feedback in the chat section. I just want to welcome that from everybody that's tuning in. Even more. That's great. We love to see that engagement. We love to see that involvement. So keep it coming. Yeah, that's great. Somebody adding a Chanel block to my calendar now. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Martha, yeah, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this, just because in the world of law, so many lawyers, judges I've met are always coming up with some really incredible way to try to combat the stress that they deal with. It's a very high stress, high performance job, training for marathons, practicing for an Ironman, or seeking intense therapy. I spoke to a complex litigation lawyer who just said, I do puzzles. I do 2,500 piece puzzles to quiet the mind. Could you talk a little bit about what?
Well, okay, now I'm not going to bullshit y'all. You should listen to Nigel and Chanel. That's my advice.
All right.
I'm a big reader. I find great comfort in both fiction and nonfiction and history. I read a great deal of history, and I find that sort of centers me. I love my grandchildren. My oldest grandchild lives in Berkeley, California, and we've been reading with her every single day for an hour while her little brother takes a nap. We take the load off, and so we're reading the Ichabod, which is J.K. Rowling's latest that she's posting online. It's kind of a serial thing. We're closing in on the last chapter, which is 64. So that's just a wonderful hour each day, that since the pandemic. And of course we weren't doing that before. This is, this is every weekday, as part of her education. So that's been just a wonderful, enrichment for our lives and hopefully for hers. And I know for her parents. Her parents are very grateful for that hour. So it's, you said puzzle. I was trying to think, what the hell am I going to say to this? I don't have an answer to this question. But I do crossword puzzles. I'm a big New York Times crossword puzzle doer. And that gives me comfort in the mornings. I don't feel that great unless I've done that at breakfast. So.
Yeah, a morning ritual can be very important. That's great. That's great.
That and yoga. Yoga's the other.
Oh, good. Yes. All right. Namaste, babies.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Cool. I think we are actually coming up sort of on the Q&A part of the segment. Michael, does that sound okay with you? Do we have a couple that are?
Absolutely. Yeah, we got some great questions rolling in. Some people have been sending me some private messages with those. Looks great. Yeah, we're all ready.
Cool. Let's see. And are you gonna read them, or do you
great?
Shoot
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and express the order. So first up, we have an awesome question from Sage Croft, scholar from Florida. Sage, if you're all ready, we'd love to hear from you.
Be fantastic. Can you hear me all right? Am I good? Awesome. Cool. So I had a question for the panel, and this is a bit of a grade question. It's also a long question. It's typically a lot of these difficult conversations are. So when taking a look at the collective moral views and values as a Western nation, majority of Americans seek to live their lives as generally good people, right? Who they would not be seen as overtly racist. It's just kind of our, as a nation, we tend to stand for equality in general, right? They would consider themselves as not directly contributing to any unfair conditions placed onto various minority demographics. Often this can create a sense of undermining the legitimacy of a movement like Black Lives Matter, as they don't see or knowingly understand their contributions to the direct consequences perpetrated by our current societal and political systems. So I guess my question is, how can, per se, neutral Americans effectively be reached with a message like Black Lives Matter without causing a dismissal of the movement based on their own personal experiences? And I can clarify if there's any questions from the panel too.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, that's a complex question. Any takers? Any volunteers? Are we clear on what the question is?
I can clarify if needed.
I can take.
I would actually, yeah, I would love a little bit.
I would also love to hear from Martha on this. So I'll say, I think it's a great question. Here are my thoughts. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, right? COVID-19. And what leadership is telling us is that we should assume that we have the virus and that we might be asymptomatic. So we should assume we have the virus. It might not affect us, but we should wear a mask, not to protect myself from getting the virus, but to protect myself from giving it to more vulnerable populations that it could have a more adverse effect on, and could, on the more extreme end, result in death. And so we're in two pandemics, COVID-19 and racism and white supremacy. And just like COVID, all of us really needs to assume that we have the virus, right? Because we've been socialized into a society that was founded on white supremacy and racism. And so I was culturalized into that my entire life. I was socialized into that my entire life, unknowingly. I've ingested it, all of us have. Now, for a lot of Black and brown people, we've kind of done some work to undo that just by our lived experience in understanding the pervasiveness of racism and white supremacy and how it's affected us personally. If I'm white, I might not have experienced just how pervasive it is. And so I need to know that my neutral is that I was culturalized into a racist society. And so if I'm not working actively every day to be anti-racist, then I am supporting racism and white supremacy, right? So my neutral is socialized, culturalized into a racist society. I've ingested that my entire life. Unless I work every single day to call out racism, to educate myself, to become a person who is undoing that in my personal life and in the institutions I work at and to everyone around me, calling it out, as Chanel said earlier, when I see it, then I am supporting the culture of racism and white supremacy in our society. So if I'm a person who is, who it doesn't affect in a negative way as much as other populations, I still have to put my mask on every day and do the work to protect the vulnerable populations so that they are okay.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And I love the analogy. And so I guess a little add-on on that would be, I think that a lot of general America, just white, middle class, general people, when we're speaking about racism and these kind of acts, I think a lot of the images of probably the civil rights movement and everything kind of come to mind immediately. So I think that a lot of people don't understand as far as how they kind of contribute to the systems, and being labeled as, white supremacists aiding a system like that, I think can sometimes create like a gut reaction, right, to that, as far as they're not contributing to anything like they saw in the 60s and everything. So I guess if another panelist wants to add on to this a little bit, is how can an audience be reached to get that same message across about how we contribute to that by being complacent? How can we, is there any way to better address an audience like that so there's not that initial withdrawal?
I'm going to just say one thing quickly and shut up. But if you recall, I was very careful with my words. And I said,
I'm trying to be too. It's a very sensitive subject.
We've been socialized and culturalized in a racist and white supremacist society. I never said anyone in particular was racist or white supremacist, but was being socialized into that. And so it's a part of who we are, and, part of it is just, you have to be okay with that, but I'm going to shut up.
I think that's really just a very powerful metaphor, Nigel. I think that really works. This is this invisible, it was made visible with the murder of George Floyd in a way that I think is why we are experiencing what we're experiencing right now. It's not that anybody shouldn't have gotten it quicker. They certainly should have, but this was like so in your face as to have really prompted a moment that we, again, have an opportunity to take advantage of. But I think it's also through educating ourselves. It's reading Nicole Hannah-Jones and her, work for the New York Times. I mean, her piece in the New York Times Magazine just the other couple weeks ago about reparations did such a beautiful job of laying the framework for why that is. You just have to understand the history. You can't just sort of leap there and say, well, I never did anything to anybody. That's not really the point. So I think that's what we owe I think that's what white people, owe ourselves and our fellow humanity to be working on right now. And that events have pushed that upon us in a way that is actually good. Now, speaking of self-care for one moment, I am obsessed with whatever our president says lately or tweets lately. I mean, it's not healthy. I don't need to be going there. I'm not saying that's about self-care. It's certainly not. But every time I get the little alert that says, Martha, your screen time is up 29% since last week, I think, got to back off a little bit. But I do think for all of us, finding ways to really acquaint ourselves in ways we were never taught. I mean, there's a book called Redemption by Nicholas Lehman that's about the end of Reconstruction in Mississippi that so shocked me when I first read it, because in Mississippi, you were taught Mississippi history every other year from 5th grade to 12th grade. And I considered myself a somewhat aware person, and could not believe that this truly was our history. And so, of course, are we all infected with this invisible virus? Yes, we are. And that's on all of us.
Thank you, Nigel, Martha, and Sage. We have another question.
Chanel. Sorry, Chanel.
Yeah.
Did you
Chanel. Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. Go ahead, Michael. Thanks.
Oh, great. We have a second question from Freya Abraham from Arizona.
One second, there are too many buttons on my screen. Okay. So I had a question that was, at least this year, I'll be able to vote. And I think a lot of our class, this will be like the first time for us to vote. So I think there is a lot of power that voters hold in terms of being able to hold leaders accountable. And so I have heard about signing petitions, but in terms of holding leadership accountable, are there other opportunities like local elections or local efforts that you think people are not taking advantage of or that go overlooked?
Stacey Abrams did an op-ed recently, or it was in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, encouraging people to vote. but acknowledging that that just felt weak. You know what? Okay, all right, yeah, we're supposed to vote, but come on, you know, is that really going to fix it? And yet she is so right, but she made the case for it, of course. So it really does start there. I mean, political activism starts there, and so getting involved right this minute, not just in, oh, I'm going to go vote, or I'm going to get my absentee ballot and vote. There is, I don't know if you've seen the movie, And She Could Be Next. It was on PBS just last week in two-hour segments about, it was featured Stacey Abrams and Rashida Tlaib in Detroit, and Veronica Escobar in El Paso, and a woman running for state senate in California, a few others, and this adorable very young woman, 20 years old, I think 21, Pakistani Muslim woman from Skokie, Illinois, running for the Cook County Council. And it just was totally inspiring, you know, about what it sort of needs to happen in terms of, go ahead, get involved. I mean, you may never aspire to run for office in your life, and yet that very grassroots retail level of engagement in what goes on in a democracy, there's no substitute for that. It's just where we all need to be, and we certainly need to be there right this minute, you know, leading up to the presidential. So I would encourage that. I mean, there are all sorts of wonderful groups out there working in all kinds of ways on just really improving our democratic system, and that's what it's going to take. And Stacey Abrams is absolutely right that it has to happen at that very personally involved retail level of civic engagement. My 2 bits.
Nigel, Chanel, do you want to jump in on voter issues, or?
I'll say one thing.
Yeah,
which is that, you know, Chanel and I talk a lot. Actually, Chanel kind of coined this about the root word of activism. And the root word of activism is activate, active, act, do. So really just the act of doing something is, again, creating that ripple effect of change. And so we all have a role to play in this, right? Martha's role is very concrete as a civil rights lawyer, right? Other people are organizers, and they organize protests. Chanel and I thought, well, what is our contribution to the movement, to the cause? How can we, as artists, be agents of change if we're dancers? I was living in Sweden in 2013 during the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I quit my job in Sweden as a dancer at an opera house. And I thought, I need to go back to school and become a lawyer so that I can help my community. If I want to help my community, I need to go be a lawyer and go to school. Somebody's already a lawyer. What I learned, what Chanel and I think have realized through this process of creating Move, is that the best way that I can serve my community, for me, Nigel, is through dance, because dance is what I know, and dance is what I'm an expert at. So now we're a part of co-creating a generation of young artists who have been empowered and educated from a very early age. We've reconstructed a training model where they're taking leadership seminars, where they're being engaged as socially minded citizens, where they're being taught that they are leaders and their voices have power, and where we're mixing a group of people who come from very diverse backgrounds and putting them together and creating this melting pot of community that's going to shift the way someone thinks and believes. The reason why our program is tuition free is because there are people from certain demographics who would never meet each other in traditional training settings. I go to an elite school, this person can't afford it, this person can, we never mix and interact. It's free, so talent becomes the primary determining factor. And so now this person from this neighborhood and this person from this neighborhood are coming together, and they're all sweating together and struggling together and crying together. And no matter where you come from, it doesn't matter because it's really hard, right? And for a young, wealthy white man, let's say, to model leadership that is co-leadership of a man and a woman, that are two Black people, to have faculty that is diverse, to be amongst a cohort of people who are majority people of color, how does that shift the way he navigates the world and becomes an advocate and an ally in the future and wield his white male privilege to be a part of a solution? And how do we empower the young people of color in the program to understand that their voice matters and that they have a say in shaping the future? And so if we talk about, we got to get the young people out to vote, we got to get the young people out to vote. Okay, well, screaming at them from July to November that they have to vote is reactive, as Chanel said earlier. So this is proactive work of making years-long investments in young people so that by the time they graduate and they are your age, they already know that it is their civic duty to be a part of co-creating the world that we would like to see. And that work isn't glamorous on the front, on the back end when you start it. It takes years, right? We have to be willing to do that years-long investment of work if we want to see systemic change and not put a Band-Aid on a gaping volcanic wound.
Excellent. Wow. Yeah. Chanel, Martha? Or should we take the next question in that case?
I think Nigel said it all, and so did Martha. So the only thing I will add is that as you continue to make decisions about who the leaders will be, ask yourself, do the leaders look like the world? Or do they look like one homogenous niche part of the world?
Yes.
And leadership is not just the president of the United States. Leadership is the board of directors of the institutions that you're a part of. Leadership is the president of this institution throughout the last 2 centuries. You know, ask yourself, what do I want the leaders of our country, our institutions, what do I want them to look like? Who do I want them to represent? Because if we only represent one demographic, then that's not fair. And that's not actually speaking experience of all of the people who make up this huge melting pot of the United States of America. So as you begin to exercise your civic duties, remember that that is accountability. That's you saying the world is bigger than me and my perspective. I owe it to my fellow citizens for us all to be represented. That's all I'll say.
Wonderful. Yeah. I wanted to add, I've got a Black playwright friend of mine, Ike Holter, out of Chicago, who whenever an arts institution likes to come forward with a statement about what they're doing to diversify their company, he always says, "Great, now can I see a picture of your board?" And I think it's fantastic. I think it's wonderful because it is from the top down. You know, these those spaces that are occupied by a homogeneous workforce. It really does everybody a disservice. Michael, have we got one more question?
Absolutely.
A couple more?
Thank you, guys. Our next question comes from Maria Fields from Michigan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria, and I'm from Michigan, and I've really enjoyed listening to all the ideas that everyone has put forth. So my question is, what is the best piece, excuse me, of life advice you've heard or learned from experience that you think new scholars could benefit from?
Great, and I'll just open this up for to all three. Jump in wherever you like, or take a minute if you need it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. The best piece of life advice: enjoy your youth. No, just play. I will say that as when we were younger, which wasn't that long ago, but it seems like a long time ago, I often marvel at our students who are the age of you, Maria, and all of you beautiful presidential scholars. I often marvel at the bravery and the courage to speak your mind and to call things out. I marvel at that because Nigel and I talk about this a lot. When I was 15, 17, 18, 22, even 27, there are a lot of things I just would not say for fear of being blacklisted, for fear of being penalized. Like I said earlier, I was already just feeling lucky to be in the room. And, you know, some of the institutions that Nigel and I often frequented growing up, we were two of the only Black people in the room. And that didn't mean that we were constantly navigating micro and macroaggressions. It was abundant. I'll just say that. But we internalized those things because I just didn't want to be blacklisted. I didn't want anybody to say, listen, you're replaceable, you can go. So what I'll say is, for life advice, and this is not just in political settings or in artistic settings, also in your personal life, do not be afraid to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. That's actually when you should say it. When you're like on the brink of, like, you've got that lump in your throat and you might be crying a little bit, that is your most authentic truth. Don't be afraid to speak it. Because like Nigel said, we are going to be leaning on you all to lead us into the future. The way you see the world now, at 18, I just was oblivious to it. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just like in the trenches, just trying to dance. And now I'm looking around, I'm like, wow, there's so many things I didn't say that I wish I said, you know? So I just want to empower all of you to know that what you feel and what you see and what you experience is real, and it is worth hearing. It is worth it to say it out loud, and it is worth hearing. And that is across your entire life. That's everything from how you feel about your education, to how you feel about politics, to how you feel about your favorite music, your favorite food, what you like. All of that makes you who you are, and we need you to speak your truth, because that's actually what's going to crack us into new territory. Us listening to you, us saying, wow, I'm 34 and I think of myself as young. Actually, I might be a bit of a old person now, you know, because the way I saw the world at 18 is completely different. So that's all I'll say. I'll say, speak your truth. Speak your truth.
Chanel said something that, and then I'll get to my point, but Chanel said something that really hit me, talking about the way we were kind of socialized versus Gen Z, which is, I mean, we marvel at y'all, because y'all are like, no, you're amazing. And, you know, but I want you to know, and I want you to understand very deeply that you don't exist in a silo of experience, that you have power, and that power has been built on for generations. Chanel and I were able to have the experiences and training and pedigree that we had because of people like Martha and all of the activists that worked so hard to integrate us, right, into spaces. And then for us, our activism felt like being in the room, like just being there. And we always felt like we had to be a representation of our entire race. We could never make a mistake. We had to be articulate. We had to be smart. We had to be talented. We could never mess up, because we had to prove that we deserved to be in the space that the generation before us worked so hard to make sure we had access to. Now, you get to throw that out the window, because we already did it, right? So to Chanel's point, you get to stand on the shoulders of all of that work and show up as you are and demand the change that you want to see. You are powerful. You have that power. Y'all have more power in some ways than any other generation because of social media. You can get your message out there and people can hear it all over the world. We had to go to the guidance counselor and they could just brush it under the rug. And then you talk to the principal, you know, no one says anything. Well, how am I going to get to the New York Times? You make a post that goes viral and then the New York Times is calling you. You know what I mean? So know that your collective voices have power. And so all of that feeds into my piece of life advice. I went to a conference 1 year ago, and this woman who's the executive director of Dance NYC said, I've learned that when I'm looking around and I can't find a leader, it's because I'm that leader. So when you're looking around and you're like, why isn't anyone moving us forward? Why isn't anyone coming up with the solutions? Why isn't anyone making this better? It might just be because you are the leader that everyone is waiting for. You are the leader that you are waiting for. And I think COVID-19 has provided a unique opportunity to realize that in a real way. The old world is gone. It's not coming back. This is new territory that we are going to co-create together. And as Chanel alluded to, it might just be that those of us who have been around for longer and are socialized into a way of doing things, some of us may be too rigid in our mental process of how to do things in order to, too rigid to innovate in this new world. So perhaps you all are the leaders that we're looking for because you have fresh ideas, new ways of thinking. You have mobile mindsets, right? You can process many different things at once. You can see a future that doesn't exist and you're not bogged down by the past. Learn from the past, research, do your work, but know that, you know, if you're not malleable, you'll crumble. And I think that growing up on the internet, growing up on social media, growing up in the way that you have, your brains work in a different way. And so none of us can know what the future is, and none of our experience can help because we've never dealt with with COVID-19, right? So you are the leaders that you're looking for. Step up to that and don't be afraid of it. You're gonna be afraid of it. Step up anyway.
Speaking to you as a fellow presidential scholar, I just have 4 words. With recognition comes responsibility.
Preach, Martha.
Yes, ma'am. Wonderful. Michael, have we got another one lined up from the group?
Yep, we sure do. Our next question is going to be from Sophia from Puerto Rico.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia from Puerto Rico, and I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. It's been amazing hearing all your advice and your ideas. And I just wanted to ask the panel, you all said you found your niche and you made a difference like from within that niche. So what advice do you have for us in terms of finding our niche and incorporating anti-racism into that?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sophia. It took me a while to realize this, but your niche and your passion, which might turn into your profession or your activism, is already living inside of you. You just may not know that it's a thing yet. A lot of people ask Nigel and I why we started Move NYC, why we created this tuition-free program so that we could neutralize and globalize dance at the education level, why we did that. And my answer to people is because I got angry enough and frustrated enough about a problem that had been going on for centuries that we felt wasn't being adequately addressed. And like Nigel said, we looked to the right, we looked to the left. We were like, well, it looks like we'll be doing this. But like I mentioned when I first told you about my upbringing on the way to being named a presidential scholar, I was that young Black girl who couldn't go to summer intensives because I couldn't afford it. A lot of my white counterparts, male and female, because they could afford it, they went. Talent was not a thing. It was like, I can afford to go, I'm going. And a lot of my Black male young friends also went because there were scholarships created for young Black boys to go to summer intensives because there's a scarcity of men, a scarcity of boys. But that left this demographic just out to dry. And so I was locked out of that room several times. So that happened at 15 and 16 years old. And that lived inside of me for a very long time, to the point when I got to 28 and 29, I was frustrated enough to do something about it. So I say that to say your niche and your passion is already inside of you. It may feel like just this like thing that you've been thinking about, and man, if I ever had a chance to, I might just do that thing. It's that thing. It's the little glimmering gem inside of your spirit, that tug that you feel every time you get to a place where you feel it. It's like, there's that thing again. Maybe it shows up in your dreams. Maybe it, like when you hear a conversation about it, you usually would walk by conversations, but you have to get into this conversation. That is the thing. So over these next couple years, it might show up. Listen to it. It's intuition. It's a soul tie. It's a tug, and it's real. That is your niche, and that really is your contribution to the world. And it's going to look different than your friends. That's the biggest thing that I had to like really release myself from. My contribution is going to look different than my friend who's a lawyer, and different than my friend who is a active protester, and different than my other friend who, you know, is still in school and is coming up with some incredible, you know, maybe vaccine for something in the future. We all have our lane, and we all have our own passions. So I didn't know it at 15, but that was already going to be my contribution to the world. You know, I'm even thinking bigger now. Now I'm thinking like, wow, how can I continuously, like maybe it's my life's purpose to continuously move obstacles out of the way for Black and brown people, primarily young Black women, you know? So that's like at 34, it's still expanding, but it started at 15.
I agree with Chanel. I do.
It's hard not to. Yeah. Thank you, Chanel. That's great.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Sophia. Michael, have we got another one coming?
We do.
in?
So far, it looks like we have just 2 questions remaining. Our next one is coming from Court Saunders from Washington.
Hi, I'm Court from Washington. And what I was curious about was your opinions on how the advent of the internet has really changed our way of going about discourse, especially with it promoting tribalism in a lot of ways, and how you want to go about breaking barriers so you can actually get your actual message through to people. I know that's a really packed question, but that's kind of what I was curious of your thoughts on. So, yeah.
Can you explain what you mean by tribalism?
So like a lot of people will become fixated in like one ideal and refuse to think that there's anything wrong with it. So like I noticed a lot of people, especially like at the beginning of the George Floyd thing, were saying not all cops, and that it wasn't reflective of the system per se, but were then resistant to people trying to explain other ideals, and it just kind of makes it so it's at a stalemate. And so that kind of like making it into camps so people can kind of demonize anyone who they oppose, and kind of that whole facet that tends to happen.
Yeah, that's hard.
Well, I can start on that if you want. So I grew up in Mississippi, white person, white family, went to all white public schools that were not desegregated until I was a senior in high school. You know, laws changed. I mean, there, you know, progress was made. Lyndon Johnson did sign the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and you know, my husband and I and lots of other people litigated lawsuits, voting rights and school desegregation, and endlessly for, you know, I've been a lawyer for 50 years now. And yet we did, you know, we've missed a big step, clearly. You know, so the fact that there's at least half of the population of Mississippi that, had they been allowed to vote on the flag, for the flag, would have voted to keep that flag. And 2/3 voted to keep it 20 years ago. And I'm guessing that it would have been closer this time had it been put to a referendum, but it would have lost. I'm guessing. So there's just a big job to do. I mean, internet or no internet, it's really about it's about the education and the relationships and the anti-racism, as opposed to the, well, I'm just sort of not racist, so I'm not engaging in that conversation. There's a proactive responsibility that I think is there, but I think it's about all of us engaging in that conversation, and more than just conversation, and more than just symbols. It's the symbols, but the symbols do matter, it turns out. I mean, I think I would have sort of discounted that in a way, that Mississippi is littered with, every courthouse has its, statue, its Confederate memorial, and it's that those things actually matter, and so taking them down is an important step. Even as I would go to, well, hell, why haven't we expanded Medicaid? I mean, really, we're killing people, so forget the statues. I mean, and yet, and I think the arts, the role of the arts is part of what I hear Chanel and Nigel saying, is that there's an important role for that as well, whether it's theater or dance or music, in combating this disease of white supremacy that we came into existence with, and that we still live with today. Back to Nigel's metaphor around the physically invisible virus, that infects us all. So just sort of figuring out how that happens, and I felt myself, I kind of went all about my business. There were things to do. There were lawsuits to litigate. There were policies to advocate for in the Congress and so forth. All of those matter. I'm not saying that that was a wrong thing to be focused on, but it was not enough.
And I'll say, great question. I used to get, back in 2013 and 2014, during the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, which was totally different than this reinsurgence of it, because now you have institutions and, quite frankly, white people saying,
corporations, and yeah.
All of a sudden it's like, oh, it's real.
Let's do that.
Back then it was very resistant. There was but only Black people were talking about it for the most part, and certainly no institutions were jumping on board. So there is progress there. But I was very vocal on social media, maybe to a fault. And I used to engage a lot. People, I would write something, and then it would usually be a straight white man. And they would engage because they got upset, or they were offended, or they felt like I was talking to them, even though I was making a general comment and wasn't thinking about them specifically at all. And then we would go back and forth, and we would have this thing, and we would go on, and I would do it so many times a day, or they would go into my DM, and we would just have this back and forth. And I got so tired, and I realized that you can't actually really change someone if they don't want to know. They gotta wanna know. So if they've made a decision, that this is what it is, and I'm not going to research or look into it or even hear you, there's not much you can do for that person at that point. Something's gonna have to happen within them. And part of it is as well, again, the entire educational system, as Martha said earlier, leaves out so much of our actual history. If you grow up in a white family that hasn't done extra work to know the rest of the history and fill it in for you, you really grow up your whole life knowing, that this is how it has been, this is how the world works. When someone challenges that, even if it's not direct, but just suggest that that might not be true, there's a cognitive dissonance that goes on, and it rocks everything you know to be true about who you are to the core. That's hard. That's really hard. Until I'm ready to accept that what I think about my history and myself and my family might not be the whole truth, we can't really have a conversation. On the other side of that, I started asking myself, because I would go fire, like, no, and you know, and you need to read this book, and da da da, right? And I asked myself, what is my end goal? Is it to pop off and be right, and to show them how smart I am and how much research I've done and how uneducated they are? Or is it to help them understand and move forward? I met recently a white police officer from Oklahoma, right? I think it's the first person from Oklahoma I've ever met in my life. And you know, it's the country is very racially charged right now, in particular with Black men and white police officers. And I met him and his wife, and I was with a friend, and we were chatting, and they were very nice people. And you know, we just said, we asked them what they do. I think they asked us, and we told them, and they said, and I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a police officer. And you could see the fear in their spirits when they said that, because they were talking to two Black men. And I said, thank you for your service. And the guard went away a little bit. Maybe now we can start a conversation. And we did have a conversation. We had a very honest conversation. He spoke to me about his thoughts and his feelings, many of which I didn't agree with. I spoke to him about my thoughts and my feelings, but I'm now thinking, okay, what is the end game? Because he left, he wrote me a beautiful email after, just really, he had never heard the word microaggression. It's shocking. It's shocking to me. Maybe, like, you know, he hadn't thought about it in the ways in which we talked about it. And I don't think if I had come out with the fire that he would have been ready to receive some of it. So is everything different? No, but I said to him, the next time you interact with a Black person, I want you to think of me like they could be me, you know? And the way you think of me, I'm an artist, I'm a leader, I live in New York, I've been all over the world. It's not maybe necessarily the way that he thinks of Black people when he's interacting with them in Oklahoma. And know that that could be, see me when the next time you interact with someone, you know? So I think, what is the end game? And then realizing that you just can't save everyone.
That's wonderful. Great. I think we have one more question that we would love to try to slip in.
Absolutely. Our final question is coming from Blaine from Idaho.
Yeah, hi, I'm Blaine from Idaho. As Michael said, it's kind of a two-part question. First, from Martha, I think you mentioned learning in school about kind of the history of Mississippi. Because you were coming of age in the civil rights movement, what did they teach you about civil rights? And then from there, I think if you look, over history, it really does seem like there's a positive trend in the direction of like more progressive social stances. Like we are pretty consistently making progress. And it seems like maybe in 100 years from now, we might look back and go, oh, we were doing all of these things that are really horrible right now. And what do you think those things will be, right? What might we not see coming, but we could realize in 100 years from now was a pretty awful moral stance. So, and that second part of the question is for all the panelists.
Well, I'm actually quite grateful that I went to, elementary and secondary school when I did in Mississippi, because it was at a moment when the culture was really at war with itself. I mean, so I was in an all-white school. We were directly taught racism. I mean, it wasn't just subtle. It was, we don't go to school with Black kids because only they didn't call them Black kids. because they're not as smart as you and they can't talk well and they're, they smell bad. I mean, every stereotype you can imagine. In 5th grade, I had a teacher that directly taught us that. Now, I went home to a family that didn't believe that, so I, it was a little bit confusing, honestly, to have a teacher that you were supposed to respect and, learn from, and yet being taught something. So, but it was enormously educational, as you can imagine. Once I sort of had it figured out, it's like, okay, I really get that. And then when I was in 6th grade, I had a teacher who was the cousin of Ross Barnett, was a notorious governor of Mississippi, the one who really sort of, not as famous as George Wallace, but he was the one who really brought about the riot at Ole Miss around desegregation, vicious racist. And his cousin was my teacher, and he would come to school in his Confederate uniform because this was the beginning of the centennial of the Civil War. So there was really a war. I mean, it was another war. Nobody was directly totally shooting at each other, although plenty of people got killed. But it was a war. And so that was educational in its own right. That's why I say I'm honestly not personally sorry that I had that experience, but I know what happened there. I mean, there was a generation of people who were, and probably more so in my generation, because previously Jim Crow was so entrenched that they probably didn't even have to teach it quite that blatantly. But certainly in my era, and for a generation of students and more, that's what went on. So to be awakened to, history in terms of what had happened to bring about Jim Crow, that was just brand new to me. I mean, that was just news. So I think the same thing to some degree goes on today. I mean, what we're taught in school is what what we receive as the wisdom of our elders. And if that's wrong history, then we really need to start there. Now, we've spent an entire couple of other generations disinvesting in public education. I mean, that goes back to my policy point at the beginning, that our policies that brought about mass incarceration, our policies that have brought about a state of inequality, wealth and income inequality that is put our society at the breaking point, that has to be turned back. So, and clearly public education is part of that. So now I've gone on a rant, I'm sorry. What were we talking about?
That's great. Thank you for your rant. Thank you for your rant. That could be good.
I think that's I think that's a really dope question, Blaine. Just like thinking 100 years from now, those people looked back to 2020 and had to analyze or investigate, maybe some of the actions that maybe weren't even like overtly racist, but maybe were complicit in some ways. What would those be? I think one of them is silence. Mm-hmm. It's a hard thing because, you feel like, okay, I'm just not going to say anything. That puts you in a neutral place, and that doesn't incriminate you. I'm not a bad person. When in fact, what Nigel said earlier, to be neutral and to see something and then turn your face is actually to be complicit. And that sucks. Because you're like, I'm not a bad person. Why am I a bad person if I just don't say anything? Because that's being complicit. So when I think about myself and the things I want to contribute to the world, I'm like, Chanel, it is your duty, not just to yourself and to your people, but to this world as a citizen, to not be silent. Because I don't want somebody to be silent for me, or silent for my people, or silent for my brother or my friends, and this goes beyond race. There are many, many, many things that we are addressing in the world right now. And I think in 100, I'm thinking about, even in my lifetime, what we're doing right now, talking through this computer, when in 1986, I didn't know what the internet was. The world could be a completely different place twice over in 100 years. So, it might look a little different, but I want to be able to say that I was on, in quotes, the right side of history. I want to be able to say that I contributed to the world in a helpful and healthy way. I didn't take anything away from somebody else based on my opinions or my own personal beliefs. If to respect all walks of life, to speak up for my fellow citizens, that's my duty. So I think, and it seems small, but it's huge. This idea of silence and not saying anything is actually maybe even a little bit worse than overt actions. You know what I mean? But I think of that often. I think of that when I think of my grandchildren and what they will think of me. What did Grandma Chanel do back in 2020 when she had energy and she was out in this world and she was helping people? What was her contribution? And I will never have it be said about me that I was silent. Never, never.
That was beautiful, Chanel. I think making it personal makes a difference. Instead of what will they say in 100 years, what will you say to your grandkids when they learn about this movement and they ask you what you did? That feels different. And will you have an answer that you're proud of? I'm just going to really respond to what Chanel and Martha said, and hopefully there's some answer to your question but there might not be. So first I wanted to say, in terms of the history and the slow arc of justice, in some ways it's very different. I was not taught overt racism in school. Now I'm also from New York City and Martha's from Mississippi, so I'm not sure what they were teaching in school in Mississippi, in 2000 when I went to high school. So I don't know, but I will say, for me, I still felt violence. I still felt erased. If you think about, I don't know what you've learned in your history classes, but when I learned about global history, it was all European history. And the first time Black people were introduced to me in history was slavery. So global history is European history, and the introduction of Black people into history is as enslaved Africans. That's violence. My entire history has been erased, and I've been socialized into a world that tells me that my first appearance on this earth was a slave. That's messaging. And that's where I think it goes back to what Martha said earlier about the symbols that have to be taken down. Like, no one called me the N-word, but I internalized that, And then to the question of time, 100, I just wanted to say I was a bit triggered. Nothing you said, it was what you said, but not towards you, but we just don't have another 100 years. I just saw this amazing James Baldwin video. James Baldwin is my spirit animal. I love him. And he was doing an interview. And he said, y'all always say it takes time. These things take time. And he said, okay, well, it took my grandfather's time, and it took my father's time, and it took my mother's time and my sister's time. How much time do you need for your change?
Yeah, we have Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail is to the same point, I think.
Yeah, I think we just have to say no. Say we're not going to wait another 100 years. And I think that also goes back to this idea of just staying. So I had this wonderful woman, wonderful friend, lover of dance, and she wrote me because she was feeling guilty. And she wrote me an email. She was like, I want to say something, but and this is real too, and I get it. I want to say something, but white people are just so awkward, and I don't know what to say. And I really just don't feel like it's my thing to say something, or like that it's my fight, but I support it, and I know that I'm on the right side of history. She's obviously conflicted because she just wrote me this email out of the blue. But it has to be all of our fights. It has to be each of your fights. No one person can do it alone. And if any of us is being marginalized, then that creates space for all of us to be marginalized. All of us in some way have felt small. And I use that, I'm a man, I say this to Chanel all the time, I'm a man, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. And I never will. I do know what it's like to be a Black person and how I felt. I do know what it's like to be a gay person and how that is felt and how the ways in which I've been oppressed and marginalized. And so while I'll never know what it means to be a woman, when Chanel tells me something, I just believe her. And I do the work to be better because I can empathize with the feeling of feeling small, of feeling pushed down, of feeling oppressed. And so how can I use the ways in which I am privileged, because all of us here are privileged, every single one of you, every one of us has privilege, and that's okay. We don't need to apologize for our privilege, but what are we gonna do with it to make the world better? What are you gonna tell your grandkids when they ask you how you use your privilege to make the world a better place?
Beautiful point to end on, I think. Thank you so much, Nigel, Chanel, Martha, and all the participants. We want to send a big thank you out for being part of this. There are a lot of very profound ideas swirling around in this Zoom room. I encourage everybody to go take some notes afterwards, if you can. Write a couple things down if they struck you as extra meaningful or extra true. So with that said, I would just like to say, Black Lives Matter, in accordance with our panel and its title. Stay healthy, stay sane, take care of one another, and know that, you know, at the Presidential Scholars Foundation, you always have friends, you always have a place to turn to now that you're part of this great group of peers and alums. So don't be afraid to reach out if you have questions regarding these topics, or if you're just looking for somebody to talk to about your summer internship that maybe fell through or what have you. So with that said, thank you again. And I'm gonna throw it over to Tom for one final goodbye.
Yeah, look, first of all, I just want to thank everyone again. The eloquence, the wisdom was amazing. I feel like the Tom that joined the conversation 2 hours ago is different now than the Tom that just 2 hours later. I've been transformed. It's been a privilege to be able to hear from all the speakers, the questions. It's been amazing. And I think we've all been a part of history today. This is the first time we've ever had this type of a discussion. I'm certain that this is only the first of many more of these discussions that we're going to have. But I am also going to challenge the class of 2020. You have to get involved. We need you to be a part of this. And I think, as the speakers have said, you know, with recognition comes responsibility. You've been given this awesome power. What are you going to do with it now? I can tell you, we need your passion, your talents, and your energy. So get involved. And now there's some practical next steps, right? Go to presidentialscholars.org, fill out the alumni database so we can keep all connected. Many of you have already joined our LinkedIn group or joined the Facebook group. Reach out. This is a platform. What we do with it is up to you. I think today you've seen a lot of the possibilities and the amazing caliber of people. You know, we are, in a way, our own tribe, and you're part of that. Mm-hmm. So please, I just say it one more time, again, on behalf of all the panelists, the board members, you're amazing, and we need you. Get involved. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Congratulations again.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.